Okay. Welcome everyone to Journeys to the Books of the Prophets. Tonight we are finishing the first book of Kings and moving into the second book of Kings. This will be the last book in this series. I never intended to go into Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. So we have many, many weeks to go, but everyone should know that the second book of Melachim will be the end of this particular series. So we're on the last chapter of the first book of Kings, chapter 22, for those who are following. And here we have a case where we've had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and a complete split in the people. But here we have an unusual case where the king of the northern kingdom, it's still Achav, the evil king Achav, and his wife, Izebel, they're still with us here. But he turns to Yehoshaphat. Yehoshaphat is the king of the southern kingdom, and he is considered one of the better kings. He's considered a righteous person, a good king. He follows the Torah. And so Achav turns to him and says, do you know that in the north of Israel, in a place called Ramat Gilad, that Aram took it from us? And it's really time for us to take it back. Will you fight with me to take back Ramat Gilad? So first of all, that's unusual because they're at each other's throats all of the time. And Yehoshaphat agrees. And he says, literally, your horses are like my horses. Your men are like my men. We will go together. And the king and Yehoshaphat said, but let's ask the prophets if this is a good idea. In those days, it was very, very common to ask the prophet of the generation whether it's a good idea to go to war. These are matters of life and death. And so Achav, even for those who have been following, he's had a number of chances to do tshuva, and he just doesn't seem really to do tshuva. So he calls 400 prophets. In the text, it just says he called 400 prophets. So when I was reading this, my first question is, according to the text, Achav and Izebel had killed all of the prophets, except for Eliyahu Navi, who is still alive and will play a prominent part in today's class, and the 100 prophets that were being hidden by Ovadiah, 50 in 2 different caves. So my first question is, where are these 400 prophets from all of a sudden? And so the explanation is that he actually is still serving the Baal. And even though Eliyahu Navi killed 400 of the priests of Baal, 450 priests of Baal, they have now been replaced. And so he's asking these priests of idol worship whether they should go to war. And they all say, yes, you should go to war, you'll be successful. This is what we see in prophecy. So Yehoshaphat, who is a God-fearing person, says, well, isn't there any other prophet that we could ask? In other words, he obviously didn't trust prophets of idol worship. And so Achav says, well, there is a prophet, and we assume that he's one of the 100 prophets that were saved, and his name is Michael. And he says, but he hates me for good reason. But Jehoshaphat was insistent that they take a prophet of God, not a prophet of idol worship. And so they call him. And he says, but before he does, one of these false prophets, he makes these horns of iron, and he like kind of puts on a theater here of how Israel is going to, like with these horns, defeat Aram. And then it's time for Michayahu to give his prophecy. And he says, yes, you should go up and fight. But Achav is suspicious because this prophet has always prophesied against Achav because he's an idol worshiper. And he says, you're lying to me. I don't believe you. Tell the truth. So Michayahu says, he says something very interesting. He says, this is the vision that I had. I had a vision, and I saw God sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven were around him. And God said, who is going to entice Achav to go to battle? Meaning that in a certain way, again, this is in human language of a deep vision that he had. Who is going to entice Achav to go to battle because he will be defeated? And it's time, if for those who have been following, God already said the days of Achav are numbered, and all of the evil that he did, it will come back upon him. So this prophet is saying, God, and so God says, well, how are we going to do this? And so they said, well, we'll put a spirit into all these other prophets who will say, yes, go to war. And so Michayahu says that this is a setup. But Achav didn't believe him. And the strange thing here is, and I couldn't find any commentary, that Jehoshaphat decides that they will go to war, even though the prophet is saying that this is going to be the way to end Achav's rule. So again, I didn't find an answer why Jehoshaphat, who was a God-fearing person, didn't listen to this prophet and say, no, like this is what the prophet of God is saying. Nonetheless, they decide to go to war. And as always, there's lots of details here. And as I said, we're not going to go into every detail of what I consider the minor stories, and rather save it for, actually, you'll see the incident that we're about to hear about. And so they go to war, and in short, Achav is mortally injured. And he tries to survive, but he dies. And for those who remember, God said that when your day comes, your blood will pour in the street and the dogs will come and lick it up. And that's exactly what the text says here. And because of that, Israel was defeated. And we'll say the only good thing that came out of it is Achav has died. And it says here, and all the other deeds of Achav are written in the book of Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. That's this book, Melachim Aleph. And so Achav dies, and Uzziah, his son, takes over. You have to remember the northern kingdom was very strong, was very wealthy, was very well-to-do. They were well established. And that's how somehow Achav managed to be king for all the years that he was. And now the text is like reviewing about Yehoshaphat, that he was the son of Asa. If you remember, Asa was also one of the better kings, and he reigned for many, many years. And he followed the Torah, and Yehoshaphat followed in his footsteps. So for many years, the southern kingdom was in good hands, which is not true of the northern kingdom. From the time that the northern kingdom was set up, we have not seen one good king. They were all considered evil and idol worshipers and turned the people against the Torah. So Yehoshaphat, it talks a little bit about how he ruled. And now he passes away. And we're at the end of chapter 22. And here it says that Achaziah, so he ruled instead of his father Achav. And it says that he did evil in the eyes of God. Not quite as bad as his father, but bad enough. And that's really how the book of 1 Kings ends. Melachim Aleph ends that Achav, who's been a major player here, passes away, and Yehoshaphat of the southern kingdom also passes away, and that leads us in to the second book of Kings. So we begin with the first chapter, and it says that the son of Achav, who was ruling, he fell from an upper story, and he was very injured. He was very sick. And so he sent messengers and said, go inquire of Baal Zavuv, the god of Ekron, whether I will recover from this or not. And so God says to Eliyahu Navi, this whole last chapter, Eliyahu Navi was not part of the story. Here he comes back on the scene. God appears to Eliyahu and says to him, you should go to this king and tell him you will not recover. You are not going to get up from your bed, from your sick bed. You're finished. And so Eliyahu is now going to go to the king and tell him. And so messengers came. One second. All right. So messengers were looking for Eliyahu Navi, but they came back to the king and they said, "Why did you return?" And they said, "Well, we met a person." They didn't say that it was Eliyahu. They said they met a person. And he says, "Why have you inquired from a false god when you could have asked a prophet of Israel to answer your question?" And so the king is like, that must be Eliyahu. Who else would talk like that? He said, "Go get him for me." And so he sent a captain with 50 soldiers. So it says that Eliyahu went up to a tall hill, and this captain with 50 men come and said, they address him and they say, "You, man of God, the king has ordered you to come to him. And so you must come down from where you are and come with us to the king." And so Eliyahu says, a little bit sarcastic, because they called him a man of God. He didn't call himself a man of God. So he says, "If I am a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven and it will consume you and your 50 men." And that's exactly what happened. Fire comes down from heaven and consumes this captain with the 50 men. So somehow word gets back to the king that all these people have been consumed by fire from Eliyahu Navi. He sends another captain with 50 men. And to make a long story short, the same thing happens. They address him as the man of God. The king has ordered you to come. And of course, remember, Achav and his wife, they were, when he was still alive, they were killing all the prophets. So here, Eliyahu is in a certain way acting in self-defense. So he brings fire down from heaven, and this captain and the 50 men are consumed. It happens a third time. And then God comes to Eliyahu and says, "Don't be afraid. Go before the king and tell him what the prophecy is." So Eliyahu does. He goes and he appears before the king, and he says, just in short, "You will not get up from your sickbed and you will die." And he leaves. And that's exactly what happens. This king dies. And that brings us to the end of the first chapter. Again, we're not going through every detail here. But this brings Eliyahu back into the story. And now chapter 2 is one of the more dramatic chapters in the book of Kings. And this is when God was going to take Eliyahu away from this world, and he was going to take him up to heaven. And so Eliyahu, remember, Elisha is now his main prophet, his second, in a sense, his replacement. He's already at Mount Sinai. God said to find Elisha, and he will take over from you. And after that, they were inseparable. Elisha was what's called serving Eliyahu. Not just that he was a student, but he was serving him. And so Eliyahu says to Elisha, you should stay here because I'm going to go to Beit El. Beit El was, this is again in the northern kingdom. And Elisha says, I swear to you, I will not leave your side. And so he goes with him to Beit El. And when they're at Beit El, these 50 prophets that Avadiyahu saved, they were based in Beit El and by Jericho. And so when Eliyahu comes with Elisha, they take Elisha to the side and say, don't you know that God is about to take Eliyahu away? And Elisha says, yes, I know. So the question is, because the text doesn't explain, well, how did these prophets know that? And how did Elisha know it? That's why he said, I will not leave your side. And so it's an interesting idea here, is these are 50 prophets. And apparently right before this, they felt their prophetic powers fading, weakening. And they understood it must mean that God is going to take Eliyahu. And that's why we're experiencing this weakening of spirit. But so how did Elisha know? Elisha, it was just the opposite. As Eliyahu is about to be taken away, he understood from a strengthening of his spirit that Eliyahu is about to be taken away. They were all totally connected to Eliyahu. He was the Rebbe, he was the prophet, he was their teacher. And so after Beit El, Eliyahu says to Elisha, you stay here. I am going to Jericho. Elisha answers again, I, under no circumstances, will leave your side. So they go together to Jericho. And then the same thing happens. The prophets of Jericho take Elisha to the side and say, do you understand that God is about to take Eliyahu to heaven? And Elisha says, yes, I know. And then Eliyahu said, you stay here because God has sent me to go down to the Jordan River. And again, Elisha refuses to leave his side. And so they go, they actually cross the Jordan. What happens is Eliyahu takes his mantle, his robe, and he casts it on the water of the Jordan, and it splits. And he and Elisha cross to the other side. And so then it says, Eliyahu turns to Elisha and says, I'm about to be taken to heaven. What can I give you? What is your request? And I will try to fulfill it. And so Elisha says, please give me 2 times your spirit, double your spirit. And Eliyahu says, that is not so simple. That is not an easy request. But if you see me when I ascend to heaven, then you will be granted with double my spirit. And then it says they were walking along the way and talking. And as they were walking, it says that a chariot of fire appeared, and it separated between them. And Eliyahu rose to heaven in a chariot of fire. So one of the questions is, what were they discussing? What were they discussing? So here's an example. We've run into this many, many times. There are many different opinions. And the truth is, we will never really know, because each one of the opinions is based on either tradition or a firm logic based on the words of all of these verses. So one opinion is they were talking about the Shema. Now this makes sense because later, many years later, Rabbi Akiva dies saying the Shema. And here it's clear, Elisha knows he's about to be taken. Eliyahu just told him, I'm about to go to heaven in a fiery chariot. What can I do for you? And so the fact is that one of the opinions, they were discussing the Shema. So this is played out in the future with Rabbi Akiva. The whole story of Rabbi Akiva being tortured with burning combs. They were literally flaying the flesh off of him. And his students are watching this, and he begins to prepare himself to say the Shema. And they say, Rebbe, how do you have the state of mind? And he says that my whole life, I wanted to fulfill the mitzvah of loving God with my whole soul. Like it says, V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha v'b'chol nafshecha v'b'chol me'odecha. And you shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might, your means. So Rabbi Akiva says, my whole life I've wanted to fulfill this mitzvah. Now that I have the chance, I shouldn't take it. So he says the Shema, and as he says the word echad, he elongates the daled and he dies. His soul leaves him. So one of the opinions is that they were discussing the Shema. And implicit in this is the idea of what's called Kiddush Hashem. We know that because of the Shema of Rabbi Akiva, that after that, unfortunately, millions of people went to their deaths in what's called sanctifying the name of God by saying the Shema. This was a known thing in the concentration camps, in the gas chambers, that literally millions of people left this world with the Shema on their lips. But here we see, in a certain way, almost a precedent for it. Another opinion is they were discussing Ma'aseh Bereshit, the account of creation. Another opinion is they were discussing Ma'aseh Merkavah. Now this, for those who followed our series on Ma'aseh Merkavah, we actually discussed this whole incident in great detail. I see many people were part of that series. So hopefully you'll remember that we learned this, but in a different context, because here he goes up to heaven in a fiery chariot. So here we're not going to go back over everything we learned about Maseh Merkava, but some say that's what they were discussing. They were discussing the secrets of creation and the secrets of our role in this world and our connection to God. Now, there's also a question, why was Elisha asking for double a portion of his ruach, of his spirit? So what's very, very interesting, and it's pointed out that according to many, when they count the different miracles that Eliyahu did in the text, he did 8 miracles. He probably did many, many more, but that is what is recorded. And what's interesting is Elisha, there's exactly double the amount of miracles that he performed, 16. And we'll actually get to a few of them this evening. And another opinion, which I had never heard before, but I liked very, very much, is, and this will take a little explanation. So first of all, we see in the life of Eliyahu, fire is a major component. We see this at Mount Sinai. So one of the ways that God appears to him is in fire. And then Eliyahu brings down fire from heaven at Mount Carmel to prove to the people who is the real God. And here tonight, we just learned that he brings fire down from heaven 3 times. And so Eliyahu is considered a fiery, zealous kind of a person. That is his personality. And the fire that he manifests is indicative of his whole ruach, his whole personality. Now we learned this also, that it says in the Gemara, and this is one of the more explicit hints to reincarnation. Reincarnation, Gilgul Neshamot, is not mentioned in the Torah or the Tanakh or the Gemara or the Mishnah or the Midrash. It's discussed, though, extensively in the Kabbalah, in the Zohar, in the Bahir, the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov. But one of the hints is the statement in the Gemara, Pinchas hu Eliyahu. Pinchas, who was also a very zealous person, even God says that he acted zealously when he killed Zimri and Cosby and stopped a plague from destroying all of Israel. And he was granted a covenant of peace. But it was because of his zealousness. And we're told that, and I'm doing this in short, is the question is, where did Pinchas get the koach, the strength he killed a prince of Israel who was having relations in an open way with the daughter of the idol-worshiping king and country. And even Moshe didn't know what to do. The elders didn't know what to do. They were frozen. And Pinchas goes and he asks permission of Moshe, and he reminded him of what the Jewish law is in such a case of such a desecration of God's name. And he acts. And so the Arizal explains what gave him the power, the strength to act. And he says that at that moment, the souls of Nadav and Avihu entered into Pinchas. Nadav and Avihu also die by a fire from God that comes and consumes them on the day that the Mishkan is inaugurated, because they went into the Holy of Holies without being commanded to do that. And they brought fire into the Holy of Holies with the incense, but a fire came from God and consumed them. And we're told, that's a very complicated story, but we're told that their souls are very, very great souls. And so at the moment that Pinchas needed to act, the souls of Nadav and Avihu, which were very fiery, came into Pinchas and gave him the strength to act. And then we make the connection. Pinchas, hu Eliyahu. Pinchas becomes Eliyahu. And so now we see Eliyahu is full of fire. So here we see a string of fiery personalities where fire plays a major part of the stories. And so Nadav and Avihu enter into Pinchas. Pinchas enters into Eliyahu. And now Eliyahu, who has brought fire down many times, ascends to heaven in a fiery chariot. So this is a very, very deep and profound understanding of the story of really hundreds and hundreds of years that went into developing the personality of Eliyahu and his ascending to heaven in a fiery chariot. And so one of the explanations when Elisha is asking for a double portion of the spirit of Eliyahu, what he was asking for is that he would also have the inspiration, the power, the strength of Nadav and Avihu. That's the double portion here. And I just learned this, and I was very, very taken by this explanation, that that's what he was asking for, because that the soul of Pinchas in Eliyahu, which had the souls of Nadav and Avihu, that is what gave Eliyahu the strength to be who he was. And so that is what Elisha is asking for. He's almost asking for specifics of the double portion is the souls of Nadav and Avihu should be manifest in him as well. So what is Elisha's response to seeing Eliyahu rising to heaven in a fiery chariot? So he says, one second. So he says, I want to read it in the Hebrew. Avi Avi, Rechav Yisrael Uparshav, V'lo Ra'ahu Od. He says, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen, and he saw him no longer. He saw him ascending, and he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel. So this is one of the things that we learned. One of the statements of the Gemara is that the Avot, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they are the chariot. And in our series on Maaseh Merkavah, we learned this whole idea of there is, as it were, the chariot of God. And there's also how human beings can be a chariot for God. And so that is what Elisha is seeing. And he's bemoaning the fact that the chariot of Israel has taken Eliyahu away. He didn't see him any longer. So the question is, Eliyahu wasn't his father, but he's crying out, Avi, Avi, my father, my father. So it's explained that a student of not just any teacher, one's teacher, one's Rebbe, he becomes like a father. And that the teacher looks at the student, not just as a student, but also as a child. And that's why all of the prophets of that generation were called B'nai Nevi'im, the children of the prophets. But what it really meant that they were all children of Eliyahu. He was the prophet, and he was the one who began this idea of schools of prophecy. And so they were called the B'nai Nevi'im. In our day, we have a classic example that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as is known, had no physical children. But he made it clear that everyone in Chabad he considered them his children. So he had like thousands, tens of thousands of people that he considered his children. So what happens now is that here we see, this is not the first time, we see that Yaakov, when he hears about Yosef, he tore his clothes. And here it says that Elisha, he did like Kriya. He tore his clothes. It's like his father. And that's one of the mourning customs, to tear your garment. So he tears his garment, and the mantle of Eliyahu did not go up to heaven with him. So he took the mantle and he recrossed the Jordan, and he did the same thing that Eliyahu did. He cast his mantle down, and he says, "Where is the God of Eliyahu?" And when he struck the waters, it parted, and he crossed to the other side. And some of the prophets witnessed this. And so they understood immediately that Elisha is now the prophet, and he has the same ruach as Eliyahu. And so Elisha goes back to Jericho, because that's where they were before they crossed the Jordan. And so the prophets, because they didn't witness this, only Elisha witnessed this. And also, I just want to mention that why did Eliyahu, at God's command, cross the Jordan? And so one of the explanations is that he wanted to be as close as he could to where Moshe Rabbeinu is buried. Now, we don't know where Moshe Rabbeinu is buried. The end of the book of Devarim says explicitly that to this day, we do not know where Moshe is buried, but we know approximately where he's buried, in approximately. And so In the previous class, we discussed many connections between Moshe and Eliyahu. Eliyahu goes to Mount Sinai. He stands in the cave that Moshe stood in when the 13 Mirot of Rachamim were revealed to him. Moshe had to run away from Pharaoh. Eliyahu had to run away from Achav and Izebel. And they were both prophets. And Eliyahu fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, just like Moshe had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. Moshe was a prophet, Eliyahu was a prophet. So here, he's taken up to heaven in close proximity to where Moshe was buried. So Elisha is now back in Jericho. And the prophets who understood that Eliyahu has been taken, but they don't know what that means really. And so they say to Elisha, maybe we should look for him. Maybe he was lifted up and he fell down. He descended back to earth. Maybe he's somewhere wandering in the mountains. We should go look for him. And Elisha says, no, you don't know what just happened. But they pressed him, and Elisha agreed. He said, okay, you want to look for him? Go look. So it says that they searched the entire area for 3 days, and they didn't find anything. And so they come back to Elisha, and then the people of Jericho come to Elisha and say, this is really a very decent place, but the water is cursed. We can't drink the water. And so, like, our life here has become very bitter. Now here, there's a whole question. What are they doing in Jericho anyways? Didn't God tell Yoshua never to rebuild Jericho? So again, they're different of opinions. If you remember, the whole beginning of Eliyahu making a decree that there would be no rain until he decreed it happened in Jericho, because there was a person who changed the name of Jericho. Instead of it ending with a vav, he changed it to end with a hey, and thought that's how we can get away from this idea that this place should never be rebuilt. But part of the curse that Yoshua received is anyone who does try to build Jericho, they will pay with their elder son and their younger son. And that's what happened to this person. His 2 sons died as they were building Jericho. So it's a question, what are these people doing there? So obviously they were the leftovers from this attempt to rebuild Jericho. It could be that they weren't in what's called Jericho proper. They were just in the area. Nonetheless, the waters were cursed. And this is connected to the curse that Yoshua received from God about not rebuilding Jericho. So Elisha said to them, bring me a new kli, a new flask, and put salt into it, and bring it to me. And he went to the source of the spring, and he cast this water with the salt by the spring, and it healed the waters. And Elisha said, God has said the waters are now healed. There will be no more death. And apparently the women were miscarrying. And he said that that curse has been taken away from you. And so here, the people already are saying Elisha is truly the replacement for Eliyahu. He's already performing miracles. So here it's interesting because this is not the first time that water has been sweetened, bitter waters being sweetened by something bitter. This takes us back to Moshe. When after they crossed the Red Sea, they went 3 days without water and they came to a place called Mara, and they couldn't drink the waters because it was bitter. And God said, take a tree and throw it into the water and it will sweeten the waters. So one more mystical opinion is, what's this tree that Moshe threw in the water? It was the tree of life. And they went 3 days without water, and the sages interpreted this to mean they went 3 days without learning Torah. And that's why the Baal Shem Tov says it's not that the waters were bitter. It says marim hem. The people were bitter because they were so involved with the booty that they had gotten from the Egyptians who had drowned in the sea. They forgot to be learning Torah. Based on this, the sages established that publicly a Jewish community should never go 3 days without reading the Torah. That's where it comes from. Therefore, we read the Torah publicly on Mondays, Thursdays, and Shabbat, so that more than 3 days would never go by, because again, it's interpreted they went 3 days without water as meaning the Torah. But the other explanation is that he threw a bitter branch into the water. I don't remember exactly, but there are different opinions what exact tree it was. But this is this idea that the sages later said, look at the difference between the way God heals and human beings heal. Human beings heal with opposites. God heals with same. And this is what's called the secret of homeopathy. It's also the secret of vaccinations. Vaccination is you take a little bit of the disease that you want to vaccinate against, and you vaccinate a person so they have a little bit of it so that the body creates antibodies against what you want to prevent. So that's likes curing likes. So that's what Elisha does here. He sweetens the water through the salt, which is considered bitter. Now, what happens afterwards is we'll call it a strange story. Elisha leaves there to go to Beit El, because that's one of the last places Eliyahu was. So while he was going there, it says some young boys came out and taunted him and were saying, you baldy, because apparently Elisha was bald. And they were making fun of him. And so as he passed by, so he turned and he cursed them. And then it says that 2 bears came out of the forest, and the actual words are that they tore apart 42 of these young children. So this is not a simple story. Like here, already we're seeing Elisha with the same zealousness of Eliyahu. Already tonight we learned that Eliyahu brought fire down from heaven and destroyed the captain and 50 of his soldiers three different times. But there's a lot of discussion about, first of all, what does it mean, Na'arim Ketanim, little children? So many of the commentaries say they weren't little children. These were people who had small minds. It's called Mochin Dekatnut. They were small-minded. And why were they jeering Elisha? What purpose? Because he is bald? Doesn't make sense. So the sages explain what's happening here. These people who were jeering him had a cartel. Their cartel was, because the waters were undrinkable in Jericho, they had a business where they brought water from a distance and they sold it to the people at exorbitant prices. And now that Elisha had sweetened the waters, it's as if he took away their parnasa. He took away their way of making a living. And so they weren't very good people. They were taking advantage of all of the people. And so that is why Elisha cursed them. So he understood who they were, why they were jeering him. Remember, he's a prophet. He understood the whole story here. And he cursed them. And then it doesn't say he cursed them that a bear would come out of the forest and tear them apart. It just says that he cursed them. So there's a discussion again, like, did two bears really come out of the forest and consume them? And so some take it literally, but others, and it became, a saying there was no forest and there were no bears. And this became a saying to this day. Like if someone is, let's say, explaining some like fantastic story, and so some people will say, I don't remember exactly in Hebrew. I see Toby shaking her head. She probably knows, but it's something like Lo haya ya'ar, lo haya dubim. There was no forest and there were no bears. It's like symbolic. Lo dubim, lo ya'ar. Thank you. No bears and no ya'ar. It's somehow symbolic language that when he cursed them, their fortunes vanished. Their business vanished, but because it was an evil business. Now, without, I don't know if I should even say this, but I'm not saying this in a political way, for or against, but I can't believe, as we're learning this, that what just happened in Venezuela is talking about cartels, talking about evil businesses. I couldn't stop myself from making some kind of a comparison without discussing, is it constitutional, international law. I'm not going into that place. But here, Elisha doesn't just curse people for no reason. He saw, and actually one of the explanations is, again, it's connected to Moshe, is if you remember, when Moshe, he goes out to check about his brethren, he now understands that he is Jewish, but he's still the prince of Egypt, and he sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Jew, and it says he looked here and he looked there, and he killed the Egyptian, and he buried him. And so the commentaries say, what does it mean he looked here and he looked there? Obviously, the simple meaning is he was looking to see if anyone is watching. If someone's watching, it probably isn't a good idea for the prince of Egypt to be killing an Egyptian taskmaster who's beating a Jew, which was happening all the time. That's the simple understanding, but the commentaries say he was looking into the future, and he saw that no good would come from this person. And therefore, he killed him. It wasn't just that he was beating this Jew to death, but he saw that no good would come from him. And so one of the commentaries says the same thing. Elisha, who is a prophet, he sees that these people who are jeering him, that no good is going to come from them. That just like they had one cartel, they're going to start another cartel and do more evil. And so therefore he cursed them. But again, did two bears really come out of the forest and tear these people apart? Again, it says young children, but the sages don't understand it as young children. And so with that, we finish chapter 2. And like I said, for the rest of the book of Melachim, those places where, and again, I have the responsibility where I feel it's worth it to delve into the story in a deep way, I will. And those chapters that deal with less well-known stories or less impactful stories, we will go a bit faster through them. So we finished the last chapter of the book of Kings, Aleph Melachim, and here we started in the 2 chapters of Melachim Bet. L'chaim, everyone, l'chaim. Wow, I see only 5 chats. So we're going to go through those quickly.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Wait, one second. I have to do it differently. Okay. Okay, I'm open the chats. What might be everyone's unmuted. What might be the reason to cause the death of Eliyahu? Was it a reward or punishment? Did Eliyahu do something to cause this reward or punishment? We touched on that. I'm not sure I would call it a punishment, but if you remember when he was at Mount Sinai and he complained that the people had broken the covenant, and he repeated it twice, that's when God says, go find Elisha and he will take over from you. So we would say it like this, that Eliyahu had finished what he had to do in this world. I would not call it a punishment per se. It was more that God had determined that Eliyahu had done as much as he could do, in this lifetime, and it was time for him to move on. Now, his moving on is somewhat unique. Eliyahu becomes an angel, and it's not an ordinary death, and it's hard to say, is it reward or punishment? We learned that in a certain way, the fact that Eliyahu comes to every Brit was a bit of a punishment, even though we look at it as a great merit that Eliyahu comes to every Brit. But because he said that they have broken your covenant, so God says, even though it looks really bad and they've been worshiping idols, but not everyone, and the covenant will never be broken. So it was a little bit of a punishment, but Eliyahu becomes an angelic figure, like Hanoch became an Enosh becomes a angelic figure. Okay, Brenda says today's class began.
Before you go on,
yes,
if I may have the floor for a minute, you were taught earlier. You were talking about Jehoshaphat and him inquiring about another prophet, and I wondered if I might read to you the paragraphs that Steinsaltz makes comment about that.
Okay.
Since we don't have a lot of chats. This is chapter 22, verse 7. Another prophet of the Lord. Jehoshaphat was not afraid of going to war, and yet he sought the opinion of another prophet. The sages explained that although he assumed that the others were also prophets of God, Jehoshaphat did not accept their prophecy because he had a tradition from his ancestors that two true prophets do not express their prophecies in precisely the same style. And this comes from Sanhedrin 89a. When all the speakers say the exact same thing, this might be due to group hysteria rather than stemming from an authentic prophecy. Although many prophets reach a state of prophecy through ecstatic inspiration, and when their prophecy is forced upon them, they sometimes act in a manner that appears insane to an observer. Nevertheless, the true prophet always retains his individuality. It was the uniform delivery of the prophet's statement that aroused Jehoshaphat's suspicions that their message might not be true.
That's very good, because all 400 said the same thing. So that is a very, very good point. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Rabbi Steinsaltz.
Yeah.
Okay. Brenda says, today's class began with a reference to Avadia. This Shabbat, we had the privilege of a further study of Avadia in Tzvi Reisman's The Hebrew Months in Trei Asar, an amazing, enlightening read. Turns out this month of Tevet is the Hebrew month associated with Avadia. The class today and last week mentioned Avadia in the month of Tevet. That blesses me. Avadia is very associated with oil, and I think also love and obedience. For further study, I highly recommend this powerful, concise, short read. The book is available on Amazon in the US. And there is the link to the book called Trei Asar. Trei Asar means 12, meaning the 12 months.
I have strong reason to believe that the Trump administration is getting ready for a massive RICO case in Minnesota.
Wait, who is speaking here?
Sorry, that was me. Sorry about that.
Wait, I'm kind of lost. What just happened?
No, it's a digital error here on my social media site. So I'm just.
It appears to be Peter.
Yeah, me, okay. Peter. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so thank you, Brenda. Yes, Ovadia was it's one of the 12. Um, they call them minor prophets. Doesn't really mean they're minor, just that their books are shorter. So thank you for that. David says, I find the question of Eliyahu crossing the Jordan interesting. It must indicate that the fire of Eliyahu has a preparatory function rather than a function connected to receiving physical inheritance, in the same way that Moshe prepared the nation to enter the land, but did not enter himself. Before entering a higher level, one must be purified as in a mikvah. Remember the law of my servant Moshe, the statutes and rules that I commanded him at Horeb for all of Israel. Behold, I will send you Eliyahu, the prophet, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. It's from the book of Melachim. And he will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with the decree of utter destruction. Okay, David, I'm not sure what you're trying to say here.
So it seems like Eliyahu, we are to look at him as preparing for something that follows him. He is a fire, a cleansing fire sent to the nation. But I'm not exactly sure what it is that he prepared the people for. He put the fear of the Lord in the people somehow, to leading to repentance. But I'm not sure that whenever I see someone go over the Jordan to the other side, to the east side of the Jordan, there's something about that is indicating it's a step before you get into the land, meaning that it's a preparatory step. So the Moshe, he can take them up to the land, but he can't go in himself. He's preparing them for the land. And entering the land is entering your inheritance. It's entering the physical, the sovereignty of your physical being and the resources that you need to do the work that you need to do in this world and to achieve maturity. But Moshe is not able to get you. He can only prepare you for that. Somehow Eliyahu, he just prepares for those final stages.
I hear what you're saying on a, we'll call it a simple level or a more contained level. He is preparing Elisha to take over for him, because when they crossed the Jordan, they crossed together, and he knows that he's about to be taken to heaven. Apparently, Elisha, in a certain way, also knows. So I'm just trying to take what you're saying and apply it in a very, like I say, a miniature way. Is this whole thing of crossing the Jordan was in preparation for him to ascend to heaven in a fiery chariot. And that experience somehow is going to help Elisha in his being able to take over. That's what comes to mind. I'm not sure if that's what you're trying to get to, but.
Well, it seems like if he's ending his life on the other side of the Jordan, that means that his life is summarized by the other side of the Jordan, not by the west side of the Jordan. It's by the east, the land to the east of the Jordan. In the way that the final moment of life is somehow a summary of your life. I guess I haven't really thought of Eliyahu in this. The whole thrust of his life is preparing the people of Israel for something big, the great day of the Lord.
Oh yeah, okay. Once you bring in Malachi, there is a connection, but that still hasn't happened. So we're still waiting for Eliyahu to return and turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. That is what we are waiting. That is actually the Haftarah that we read on the Shabbos before Pesach, on Shabbat HaGadol from Melachim. That's what we read. And that's why it's called Shabbat HaGadol. It says, because it says, behold, I will send you Eliyahu, the prophet, before the great and awesome day. And it's Gadol. And so that's what we call it, Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat before Pesach, because we have anticipation for Mashiach coming during Pesach.
Yeah, and it seems like we're with the end of that verse, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. Why would he strike the land with a decree of utter destruction? It's because they're so fractured that even within the family they're fractured. There's a great repentance that has to happen that he helps to usher in.
Right.
Through his fire and his connection to God somehow is that key to that fear and that repentance.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Toby comments on your comment saying maybe it's not a preparation, maybe crossing back over the Jordan is somehow accessing an earlier state. Toby, do you want to explain that? If you're still there?
I'm not sure. I'm just thinking about what David wrote, and I think what you were saying, David, is that I don't know. I said the connection of the fire. I'm not quite following what you were saying, but I was just thinking that going back over the Jordan would not be a preparation for anything. It would just be somehow going to an earlier time, before other events happened, and perhaps accessing, the spiritual energies that were available at a prior time. Because
So Toby, as you're speaking, and what David said, what came to me is Eliyahu understands that his mission in this world is over. And so, interestingly enough, he crosses over the Jordan. I'm kind of thinking because he kind of wants to be near Moshe, who also couldn't cross into the land. In other words, Moshe's purpose in this world came to an end. He was not meant to come into Eretz Yisrael for whatever reason. So here, Eliyahu maybe is realizing that his feeling that the people had broken the covenant. He also understood that his tafkid is over. His purpose is over. And now he's going to the other side of the Jordan to be with Moshe. Even though he ascends to heaven. But again, some of the commentaries said that he crossed over to be near Moshe. So David, I think, picked up on that. And I think that perhaps that was his psychological frame of mind, that he had done what he had to do in, call it, Israel proper. The east side of the Jordan at that point was Jewish. So it wasn't like he was like going completely away, but it was the other side of the Jordan. Anyways, that's just what came to me.
Why, David, did you come up with that thought about the fire of Eliyahu has a preparatory function?
It's partly from this verse in Malachi, but also just the idea that he has this strong connection to Moshe, and Moshe has this preparatory function for the entire nation in leading that but he can't get them to the land for whatever reason. It's even obscure in the text. It's hard to understand why he's kept out of the land, but he is preparing the people to receive their physical inheritance. And he ends it, in fact, probably where Eliyahu ascended was very close to the grave of Moshe, which no one could, is hidden, but it's there somewhere. It's right there. So the Rabbi Trogman was talking about the explicit connections between Eliyahu and Moshe and how similar some things were in their lives. And it seems to me that both of them have this connection to prepare, to this word, to this idea of preparing.
Okay, we'll have to give it more thought.
Rabbi,
Brent? Yeah,
I'm so sorry. Go ahead if you want to continue in the
no,
chat.
go on.
No, I just want to know more about why we believe that he ascended and didn't die. I mean, we believe that he remained somehow alive in his body, or isn't that correct?
It says in the Gemara, I didn't have a chance to look up, that there were considered 10 people who ascended, how do we say this? That they didn't die in the usual way, that they were alive in their death.
They were taken, but they didn't somehow go over
die.
to the,
Yeah. So he's one of them. I didn't have a chance to look at the others. I know Yeshua ben Levi is considered one of them, but there's an interesting story. It says in the Gemara, Yeshua ben Levi, also not as dramatic, ascending to heaven in a fiery chariot, but he didn't, lo met. But there was a place in Sipori. Sipori was at one point the home of Yehuda Nasi, and was very connected to writing down the Mishnah. And there is a person there, his name is Mitch Pilsner. I hope I said that correctly.
Really familiar.
Who has an Airbnb. And his wife was from Denver, so we had some kind of a connection. So we stayed in this place a few times, a beautiful place. And after we had been there many times, he was always, they had a lot of land, like, I don't know, like 40 dunams or something. In his, building different things, he actually came upon the grave of Yeshua ben Levi. And it was really a sensation, because it says in the Gemara that he didn't die. And they found, and they it's the real thing. It's his real gravesite, is Yeshua ben Levi.
It has a marker?
It had either his name was on it, or there was some way that they could identify that it was 100% Yeshua ben Levi. And then people started going there, and
wow,
it was a whole thing. Anyways, it's hard to understand, truthfully, what does it mean? I didn't go into this, but what does it mean exactly that he ascended to heaven in a fiery chariot? It's not easy to try to describe what does that mean. So, but anyways, the idea was that his soul was transcended the physical, and turned into an angelic, eternal force, just like the soul is eternal. But we're used to people actually, their body dies and is buried, and the soul somehow exists on a different plane, life after death, reincarnation, the whole thing. But there's something more, call it special, about the way Eliyahu ascended to heaven in a fiery chariot. And the only one who witnessed it was Elisha. But this is our tradition of what happened to Eliyahu.
But given what we learned in your other class, Kabbalah in Maaseh Breshit, that and Maaseh Merkava, I'm sorry, that wouldn't it attest to the fact that Eliyahu did accomplish what he was supposed to accomplish in the world? If he's seen to be riding a chariot, then it to me says that, you know, he mastered, and he was, you know,
Yes.
he accomplished what he was supposed to, and that's the image of riding the chariot, that he created a chariot in the world that he was meant to create for
I
Hashem's
agree.
purposes.
You described it very well. You described it very well. He
Thank you.
transcended the physical. And again, that's why the first question we're asked tonight, was it a punishment? So I said, no, we really can't look at it as a punishment. Just like, even though in the text, since it was brought out that Moshe, it was decreed that he could not come into Eretz Israel, and on the surface, it was because he hit the rock twice and didn't speak to it. So on a textual level, it was, okay, that is the reason, because he hit it twice, and God said, now you can't come into the land. Nonetheless, here 3,300 years later, people are still trying to figure out exactly why that was the so-called punishment. Why couldn't Moshe come into the land? Was it really because he hit it twice? Were there other reasons? This is a whole other discussion. But Toby, you expressed it very well, that his ascending to heaven in a fiery chariot, in a certain way, was the product of everything that he had accomplished.
Right.
That's why, again, we don't want to call it a punishment. It's just like Moshe didn't come into Eretz Yisrael. Okay, there were reasons for it, but look what he did accomplish. Look what he did accomplish. So, and there it said that he died with the kiss of God.
Who are you speaking of?
About Moshe.
Oh, yeah.
So that also is not a usual kind of description. We're told, certain tzaddikim, Aaron and Miriam also, we're told, died with the kiss of God. But that was because they earned it. They reached that level that they could die with the kiss of God. So here Eliyahu, and it's very connected to his fire. The idea that fire, as we discussed tonight, appears over and over, Nadav and Avihu, Pinchas, Eliyahu, physical fire, but also the fire of zealousness. And so that's connected to the fiery chariot. It's a product of everything that he had accomplished. Okay, there's a couple more chats. Brenda said, and then we get to Lewis. You're next, Lewis. Brenda says, is there any significance in there being 42 small-minded, taunting people? There are 42 stops on the journey to the wilderness, And I thought that those 42 steps correlate to our life's journeys in some tangible way. The number 42 just jumped out to me. So anytime you have like a significant number like that, there's probably a connection. I have to say, at least in what I was learning, I didn't see an actual connection between the fact that there were 42 children here or adults who were small-minded and the 42 steps in the desert. But that doesn't mean that there isn't some deep connection, that at some point some commentary actually made the connection. As I'm saying that, I can't think of something, but maybe something will come to me or someone else, what the possible connection could be. Okay, Louis, you said you wanted to, it was hard to write what you want to say, so.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It actually, this is, my question relates to David's in a little bit as well. When you were discussing what was Eliyahu Hanavi and Elisha discussing just before his raising into Shemayim. And so the most common that we think about is saying this, that we say Shema on our deathbed, and that's become custom. Not necessarily from their discussion, but I think more from other historical events that you also mentioned. But the other opinions, do they not still hold weight and give us insight as to what was his preparation for his leaving and going up to Shammai? If it was Shema, if it was Merkava Breshit or the Merkava, these are subjects that might lead us to understand what was he preparing for. But also, do we want to emulate that? Not that I want to think about my demise and my, what's going through my mind when I might be in a state of nearing death, but do people have discussions of those are things that we should be thinking about or doing or involved with at a sick bed or in a situation that may be leading towards our demise?
Okay, so you brought out a very, very important point that I didn't mention. I did tell the whole story of Rabbi Akiva, people dying, Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. But I should have mentioned, and I'm glad that you did, that every person, if they're conscious when they're about to leave this world, we do say the Shema. So it's not just Kiddush Hashem. We're told, and there's a whole confession that we do, like doing tshuva, because there are a number of stories in the Gemara of people who led very, very not kosher lives, but in the last moments before death, they did tshuva, and it was accepted. And so therefore, I'm not sure exactly at what point in Jewish history, but it became a custom that obviously if you're not conscious, you can't do this. But sometimes people are conscious that their soul is about to leave, and you say the Shema and this confession. Other people, if someone is in a state of they're really unconscious, will actually say the Shema as it were for them. So I just, give me a second, because I just turned here to see if there are any other opinions as to what they were discussing. Just give me 1 minute. So Shema is like probably the most prominent opinion of what they were discussing. But they also say that some say they were discussing about the temple. Others, like I said, Maseh Bereshit. Others say Maseh Merkavah. Others say they were just learning Torah, just in general.
So with these opinions, are they then telling us that's what we should be doing?
Well, first of all, this is a classic example of it's not one and not the other. Anytime, and this happens actually hundreds of times in the Gemara, we have many opinions. There's always an attempt to try to see how all of them are part of the picture, are part of the puzzle, are part of the reality. So it's almost always an attempt at unity. And so what you're asking here is not, actually it says that a person should contemplate each day as if it's their last. So if that is true, then what you're saying, Louis, holds true, that all of the things that I just mentioned should be on our mind every day. The Shema, Bereshit, Merkavah, Torah, Yerushalayim, the temple. All of this is just kind of part and parcel of our everyday. When we say Maseh Bereshit, we could just say, we say it in our davening. Uvetuvo mechadesh b'kol yom tamid Maseh Bereshit. That God in his goodness recreates the world at every day, every moment. So what you're saying is, yeah, Maseh Merkavah means the way that we receive the light, how we return it. That's one of the things we learned about Maseh Bereshit is, as it were, Or Yashar, light coming from above to below. Maseh Merkavah is our light returning to Hashem. So I think what you're saying, Louis, is very well taken, that yes, all of these opinions are what we should be thinking about every day. Listen, in the Shemona Esrei, we're davening for Yerushalayim every day, 3 times a day. As I just said, in our prayers, we talk about Maseh Bereshit, the actual words. And everything that we're doing is returning light. We're trying to do Maseh Merkavah. So that's very good what you were saying. And David's hand is up. Yes. We have maybe 10 minutes more.
Okay,
Yes,
I see that there's just one more chat, Rabbi, if you wanted to do that.
Chat, because we always try to get through all the chats. So Peter asks, can you explain why there are only 24 books in the Tanakh? It's an excellent question. How did they come up with 24 books? So approximately 2,000 years ago, this is very interesting. For those who came to the Maseh Merkavah, if you remember, in Chagiga, it says that we owe a great debt of gratitude. And I'm trying to think of his name right now. I think it's Yoshua ben Hanina, because there was talk of not including the book of Ezekiel in the Tanakh. And if you remember, it says that he took up 300 barrels of oil to his attic, and he dove into every single word in the book of Ezekiel till he could explain any of the seeming contradictions. And I mentioned on the side that this attic was also the place of many, many important discussions. One of them was which book should be included in the Tanakh and which not. And so the simplest way I can explain is, of course, the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, is divine. But all the books of the prophets and the writings, Nevi'im and Ketuvim, the only ones that are included are those that are considered to have been written with Ruach HaKodesh, with divine inspiration. And therefore, there are many books. Some of them have been pretty much ignored through history. I think in recent generations, many people have delved into them. And they're very important historical documents, but it was just considered, for example, we just had Hanukkah. So there's the first book of the Maccabees and the second book of the Maccabees. And it's very important historical documents that were written at the time. And we learn a lot from them, but it wasn't considered that it was written with Ruach HaKodesh. And so to answer you, that's why the 24 books that are in the Tanakh are all considered to either be the first 5 are divine, and all the others are Ruach HaKodesh. So that's the simple answer, how they came up with 24 books. And the 2 books that there was debate about was the book of Yechezkel, of Ezekiel, because they weren't sure if the secret of the Merkavah should be included. It was so considered so mystical, so secretive. But they decided to include it. And the other one was the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim. They seriously considered not including it. And it was on the authority of none other than Rebbe Akiva, who said famously, all the books of the Tanakh are holy, but Shir HaShirim is the holy of holiest. And on his opinion, it was included. Okay, so now, David.
Yeah, I have another thought, but I'm wondering if anything pops into your head when you hear the number 24. I'm just looking through the chats here, I'm noticing 24 is the reverse of 42.
Okay.
But, or it's 2 times 12, and 12 is an important number. I'm wondering if part of Peter's question is why the number 24?
Okay. I mean, there are mystical reasons. The number 42, for example, there is what's called the 42-letter name of God. And some even say that God created the world through that name. And of course, what Brenda brought, this idea that the 42 stops relates to each and every person. That's a very famous Torah from the Baal Shem Tov, where he was trying to explain that, because you could ask, why do we need to know the names of all these places? And they went from here to there and here to there. So he explained 42 stops in the desert. They are not just talking about that generation. They're talking about the journey of every person through life. And of course, the 42 words of Ana B'Koach, and Rav Ginsburg brings down that the root word for love, Aleph, Hey, Bet, appears exactly 42 times in the Chumash. And so he has a whole Torah that the 42 journeys are that they made it through the desert for 40 years was an expression of God's love. for the people, that he led the people through 42 journeys with 42 aspects of love. So 24, I'll just mention that if you remember in Sefer Yetzirah, two stones build two houses. 3 stones build 6 houses. 4 stones build 24 houses. What's a stone is a letter, and a house is a word. So 2 stones, Aleph, Bet. So you can make 2 words from it, Aleph, Bet, or Bet, Aleph. But if you have 3 letters, you can build 6 words, 6 roots. If you have 4, you can build 24. And so Kabbalistically, the number 24 is the amount of permutations you can make of the name of God, Aleph and Daled and Nun and Yud. In Kabbalah, the 24 is connected to the 24 permutations of the name Aleph and Daled and Nun and Yud. The name Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey only have 12 permutations because you have a letter that repeats itself.
That's fascinating. And if you're thinking of the books of Torah as a foundation is the most important, but it's also, in a sense, one-dimensional. Now, we know with inter-inclusion, everything is there in the Torah, but in another sense, it's a foundation is a little bit one-dimensional. And you're talking here about how to put more dimensions, the fullness of space and time into expressing that from the Torah is through this number 24 in some way. That's fascinating. If I'm sorry, if you were finished with that explanation, I did look on the Chabad site for when the first deportation happened from the life of Eliyahu, as if he were maybe preparing with his fire the nation for the repentance before this deportation. It's 144 years between.
Wait, excuse me. What do you mean by deportation?
The 10 tribes.
Okay.
The northern 10 tribes. So he would have ascended in the chariot, according to the Chabad site, 144 years before the first deportation of the 10 tribes. So that's interesting because that's not a long time, and that's a gigantic event in the history of Israel.
Yeah.
The other
12
thing
squared.
is
12 squared.
Oh yeah. Oh. The other thing is, and this is probably too big of a thing and maybe a little bit controversial, but as far as Moshe not bringing the people into the land, I don't mean this as in any way derogatory toward Moshe, but he has a certain role to play. And although because of inter-inclusion, every aspect of truth he is embodying and bringing forth. Yet on the other hand, there's all of this history to follow him where we learn how to walk out the Torah better and better and better. You spend all this time on the Baal Shem Tov and his bringing of the heart into the Torah in a different way. And although that must be present in Moshe, it's not his emphasis. His emphasis is something more foundational and maybe something almost more one-dimensional or two-dimensional, something more pashat is what Moshe is, his emphasis is. And so in that way, he's preparatory because he can't get you quite into the fullness of the land. Okay, I know this is going to sound controversial because that preparatory function in some way lacks the fullness of the heart or the kavana or something that, for example, someone like the Baal Shem Tov is helping to bring forth.
I hear you. I don't know if I would 100% agree with you, but I think you have the right idea, because when he is told that he can't bring them into the land because he hit the rock twice. So one of the explanations is it's a new generation. That was the problem. Is that incident happens towards the end of the 40 years. And God wanted him to talk to the people and prepare a new generation to come into the land. But we're told specifically that it's in the text, Moshe lost his patience. He became angry at the people and he rebuked them. And his hitting, instead of talking, was indicative of the idea that he had his role was coming to an end. Something else was needed for a new generation. So you put it in the way of maybe it needed more heart, and there's something to it. That's why God wanted him to speak to the rock and not to hit the rock, because that was indicative of how he was supposed to relate to this new generation. So we could connect it to the difference between the mind and the heart. We're told specifically that if we're going to talk in those terms, that Moshe was the mind and Aaron was more the heart. And so it's not that Moshe didn't have it, but his, like you said, his function was different. He was the foundational teacher. He had to bring the Torah down and make it real for the people. And that's why he wasn't as approachable. Remember, he had to wear a veil because he was so awesome that there was like a distance between him and the people. So I think what you're saying isn't that controversial. There is definitely something to it. I just want to point out that Brenda put a link to Rabbi Simon Jacobson's teachings on the 42 journeys. I'm not sure what you're trying to say, Amy, but we're going to end with this. Chapter 1, verse 8 and 9. Hold on. I don't know what you mean. What do you mean? Chapter 1 and 2 Kings is about Eliyahu and Navi. Are you there, Amy? I guess not. Okay,
Well,
Toby.
wait, let me unmute. Okay, so chapter verses 8 and 9. Verse 8, they said to him, he was a hairy man, and a leather belt was girded around his waist. He said, it is Elijah the Tishbite. When John the Baptist shows up, he is a hairy man with a leather belt girded around his waist. And the first thing that one of the first things that is said in the Christian Bible is, are you Elijah? To John the Baptist.
Okay, very good that you pointed that out. I don't know if I want to go into great depth about this, but
you mentioned you had a lot of Christian students or people who listen to your discussions who may be Christian, and I just wanted to point out to them that this is where that the root of that question to John the Baptist comes from.
I hear you. I agree. I would just add that there's no doubt that many things in the New Testament are taken from the life of Eliyahu and Elisha. There's no doubt about it. It's very, very clear. So you're pointing out one. but it's much more than that. It's much more than
Yeah.
so thanks
also-
for yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, the gematria of 26 is God. And I wondered if you had any insight into the gematria of 2026.
No, actually, I don't do kind of like English secular gematria. I do Hebrew gematria. I know people do. I know numerology, and I know people do it. I'm very unaware of it, and so I really don't have a comment about that.
Also,
Okay, Toby.
Wait, before I lose my turn, and then I'll be off. You had mentioned
Okay.
that you had hosted a lecture by Ephraim.
Yes,
How do you say his last name? Pavlova?
Palvanov.
Palvanov. I apologize. Can you give us just a very brief summary of what he talked about?
Yeah, I think I wrote it. It's Torah and chemistry.
Right.
There was an absolute. He basically took the periodic table, and he just explained just many fascinating things in the periodic table that relate to different things in Torah. I'm going to listen to it again because I didn't take notes the first time, but it was really absolutely fascinating.
Is it recorded where we can hear it?
What?
Is it recorded where we can hear it?
Yeah, I put the link.
Oh, you did? I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
You saw it in the WhatsApp?
No, you mentioned it before he gave the lecture, but I didn't
okay.
see it in the WhatsApp,
We put
but
it
it
up
is
today.
there.
We
Oh, you
put
put
it
it
up
up today.
today.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and with the link, and like I said, it was quite fascinating. He brought it down. I don't know anything about chemistry. I don't remember anything, but he really kind of made it very accessible. Yes, Toby.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
2026.
On a completely different topic, and I actually have to go, so I'm just going to ask quickly.
I'm going after you also.
Okay.
This is
I
the
was
closure.
watching the every week on Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night. Jem puts out a new video from the rabbi, I guess, on a particular. They collect different things that he said at different times and put them together right in this presentation. And I was watching at my friend's house, and all of a sudden I'm looking and I'm saying, like, there's a picture from like around 1955, maybe even earlier. And I said, gosh, that looks like Shlomo Carlebach. And
I know the picture.
my friend's husband says,
yes.
yeah, that's him. That's Carlebach. And
Yes.
so you know the picture.
Of course, yes.
He's sitting 2 seats away.
2 seats away. Yes.
Unbelievable. I would love to get a copy of that picture. I've chose from it.
Yeah. Many people don't know that Reb Shlomo is a Ben Bayit in the Friedeker Rebbe's home. Yes. And he had.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And in the first years, he had complete entry to the Rebbe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Day or night.
I'm going to try to get hold of a copy of that picture.
Yeah. Many people don't know it, but he had complete access to the Rebbe in those first years. And that's why he's in the picture, because when the Rebbe became Rebbe,
right,
the Chabad movement was minuscule. Not that the Friedeker Rebbe was minuscule. He was tremendous. I'm just talking about numbers of people in Crown Heights who considered themselves Chabad. It was a very small community. So when the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1951, there simply weren't a whole lot of Chabadniks
Right.
at the time. And so Reb Shlomo was in the inner circle. Not even
In his family, the Karlbach line, they were Hasidim.
they knew the Reb Shlomo's father knew the Frierdiker Rebbe from Europe. That's where it started.
Wow.
That's where it
Thank
started.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know all the details, but Reb Shlomo's father took Reb Shlomo and his twin brother to the Frierdiker Rebbe in Europe to get a bracha. And he basically gave him a bracha to be Hasidim, because Reb Shlomo's father was not a Hasid. So Reb Shlomo says everything he knows was from his father.
And they say he was an Eloi, that
He
he was
was,
a genius,
yes,
but he left it to go and do Kiruv.
that's right. That's right. And a lot of it was the influence of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was at Lakewood. He was in the first class of Lakewood. The first class of Lakewood had 5 students, handpicked from Rebbe Aharon Cutler.
Who gave him smicha, do you know?
Reb Shlomo Hyman.
Hyman?
Yeah, Reb Shlomo Hyman was a big Talmid Chacham at Torah V'dat.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, and yeah, Reb Shlomo left the yeshiva world to do kiruv, but at the time he was being groomed to be like the Gadol Ador. He was being trained to be the Talmid Chacham.
What happened to his brother?
He also became Hasidic, and they split his father's shul when his father passed away. So they split his shul, and since Reb Shlomo was traveling so often, his brother was really running the shul on West 79th Street. Anytime Reb Shlomo was there, so of course he was leading the davening and everything, but it was really his twin brother who kept their father's shul going all those years. So
What was his brother's name?
Eli Chaim.
Eli Chaim.
Yeah, Eli Chaim.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. We're on for Tuesday, Bezrat Hashem. And obviously we will be continuing in the second book of Kings. Now Elisha becomes the main personality, and we will be with Elisha for many weeks, many weeks to come. Okay, everyone, thank you for coming.
Be well. Have a good week, everyone.
Everyone, take care.
Yitzhak, Rabbi. Bye-bye.